This is a CBC podcast. Want a weekly roundup of the best CBC radio programming? Subscribe to the CBC Radio 1 newsletter. Get a digest of the week's top stories, read in-depth articles, listen to interviews and documentaries, and get the lowdown on upcoming stories from CBC Radio 1 that you need to hear. To subscribe, go to cbc.ca/radio and look for the subscribe button. The CBC Radio 1 newsletter. Be informed.
Danse Anine Boujou, hello and welcome. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. I'm Rosanna Dearchild. The Junos are the biggest awards in Canadian music, and this year, the Indigenous Music Album of the Year category has a bit of everything. History-inspired opera, folk, contemporary powwow, hip-hop, and pop. From first-time nominees to perennial favorites, stick around to hear from all those Juno-nominated acts, baby, today on Unreserved. Jeremy Dutcher is nominated for Indigenous Music Album of the Year for Wolastoqiyik Lintuwaganawa, an album that paired archival recordings of traditional Maliseet songs with his own operatic sound. Welcome back, my friend.
Rosanna, it's so nice to see you
nice
again.
To see you.
I guess it's been since Halifax.
Yeah,
since I've seen you.
We hung out and bumped into each other on the street.
You never know who you're going to see in
That's
Halifax.
right. That's the Indigenous way.
Truly. It's great to be here, though.
Well, thanks for being here. So last time we talked, the album was just out, and a lot has happened since then.
Yeah.
You were featured in Billboard magazine, you won the Polaris Prize, and now you're up for a Juno. So what's it been like for you since the record came out?
It's a little less than a year now since it was released, and it's a whirlwind, honestly. Like, full of the most beautiful interactions that I could have not even dreamed of, you know? I'm touring a lot now, pretty much constantly. And everywhere I go, I get to meet young Indigenous people that are really passionate about their languages, about the songs that they sing, about who they are. And I think what I do right now is not possible in my mother's generation, you know? I'm living kind of a dream, like the wildest dream. I think a lot about the ancestors that sort of leaned into that phonograph and sang those songs like 110 years ago. And like, what did they dream? You know, what did they think that these songs could have become? I like to think of this journey as their wildest dream. And it's been really, really beautiful. You know, I've gotten to collaborate with some of my favorite artists and people that really inspire me. I did a concert in Montreal with Yo-Yo Ma.
Ooh.
A couple months back, and I got to sing at Joni Mitchell's birthday party.
Cool.
You know, just like these like bizarre little happenings that little old me gets to go and be in the presence of greatness. So I'm trying to take it all in and stay humble and stay grounded, and my community definitely helps me do that, you know.
I bet.
As I'm sure you know too.
I hear you.
Yeah, I just try to stay thankful for every day because it really is such a gift that I get to do this.
So what has surprised you most about this amazing reaction to this beautiful album?
Well, I think, you know, for me, I created this with a very specific community in mind, which was the Wolastoqiyik, the people of the beautiful river. We're only 7 communities. We're a pretty small nation in what's considered New Brunswick today. And my whole process around this album was actually coming from one of our traditional songs. There's a line that says, all my people, this is for you. You know? And it's like, this is how I orient my work. This is how I direct my work. What's been surprising for me is that people outside of my specific nation in the wider Indigenous community, and then even further, non-Indigenous people connect with the work in their own way too. So I think even though I created it with a very specific audience in mind, you know, once you put something out in the world, it gets taken up in a way that you don't get say over, you don't get control over. You know, I've been very, very fortunate that it's all been beautiful so far. Like people just reaching out all the time and saying thank you, because, you know, and what I've come to realize is that we all have a journey of reclamation. Every one of us. We all have a journey. There's always something we want to keep alive. Mm-hmm. And I think people, Indigenous or not, see that in this work, you know? And so for me, you know, using these old songs and these archival recordings, it was about just understanding the deep beauty that is there and then trying to relay my passion about it. And just to say that I love these songs so much, you know, and it's such a personal journey. That's this whole thing. And I've been really lifted up by my community, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah. Why did it surprise you that non-Indigenous people have embraced this album and your music so much?
Well, you know, I think just based on that, it's not accessible listening necessarily. You know, it's not in English or French. It's not something that this music industry or this country has seen too often in the past. And, you know, there have been great forebearers, you know, people like Buffy, Susan, and even Tanya and Tribe and all those people that really pushed the door open. And for me, it really does feel like I'm kind of walking through now. And so I really have to throw my hands up and honor those, what we call Niganie Bazi did, the ones that went before. Because I don't do this work alone. I'm so much standing on the shoulders of these amazing artists that really had to fight to be heard.
What's it like when you go home now that you've had all of this success? You said earlier that your people keep you humble.
Yeah,
what
for
does
sure.
That mean?
Mostly my mama.
She's like, you still got to do your own laundry.
You ain't special, boy. No, I mean, but yeah, I mean, going home is always a really special place, you know, where people. I'm really, really passionate about my language as well. This is something that's very, very important to me. And you know, I've been living in Toronto for the past 5 years, and you know, there's maybe one or two of us there. But to be in my territory where I can go and hear my language and sit with my elders and talk to them and hear their stories and all this stuff. This is what feeds me, and it's why I create, and it's how I create. I create in conversation with my community, not outside of it. And I offer it to everyone. What's in our songs and what's in our languages, these are offerings and they're gifts. Yeah, you know? And they're gifts that allow us to see the world and create a better and different relationship with the land around us. And so I'm unwavering in sharing that and diving deep into that because, like, as I was saying, you know, this work that I do is not possible a generation ago. And so how do I live in that mystery every day and try to lift up the stories of my nation, you know?
As you mentioned, you know, language is your passion. You're super into just speaking it and teaching it and sharing those lessons in there. Why is it so important to you to do language reclamation and preservation?
Because I think, you know, language isn't just words, right? It's relationship. And for me, our relationships have been broken or at least bent, if not broken. You know, in my mother's generation, everyone spoke Wolastoqey. You know, this was the language of every day. It was the only language that she knew until she went into the day schools. So this was interrupted in a big way. And I think in this moment of revitalization and resurgence, I think what our languages can do is provide a pathway forward for us. And hidden in those languages is how we are to relate to each other. It's how we are to relate to the earth around us. You know, for example, you know, I might be walking down the street with a non-Indigenous person and they say, oh, look at those trees over there. Aren't those beautiful? And I would say, yes, Abiziig, the tree people. You know, Iig is actually the suffix in Wolastoqey as well. It's the people. So these are my relatives. And I fundamentally treat them differently if I see them as kin than I do if they're just trees, if the life is taken out of them, if they are just inanimate objects. You know, we don't have gender in our language structure, which has a couple implications, first of all. But instead of signifying things like by gender, like French would do or Italian would do, things are animate or inanimate, alive or not. And Abiziig, those are people. Those are our relatives. And so I'm not going to go cut down a swath of them, you know, for nothing. You know, and if I do, you better believe I'll offer some tobacco and thank them for that life. So I really do feel like language, at least for me, has unlocked a whole new understanding of how to be in relationship with the place around you. And I think this is something that not only Indigenous people can learn from, But I really do believe that this is the time that it needs to come forward for non-Indigenous people too. We need to bring those understandings forward because we don't have the time left. We do not have the benefit of not totally transforming how we're living on this planet right now. We do not have the time, and we really do need to come together in a big way. And I feel like our languages and our teachings can illuminate that path.
Jeremy, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
My pleasure.
Good luck at the Junos.
Thank you, Rosanna.
Still ahead, we're heading to Musquecheese.
We're in the Samson Cree Nation. We'll just go around here. Right off to the left here is the Samson High School, and of course the RCMP Police Detachment right up here.
Touring the res with Northern Cree. That's coming up on Unreserved. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. Today on the show, a playlist of all the acts nominated for a Juno Award in the Indigenous Music Album of the Year category. Now, when you ask most bands where they get their name from, the answers are pretty underwhelming, unless you ask the snotty-nosed res kids.
Well, it started when we were like kids, right? So we grew up on the res. We grew up about like a 5-minute walk from each other. And when we grew up on the res, we grew up like free. There was like no boundaries with living on the res. We got to roam free. And with roaming free in Kitimat, it's like pretty cold out there. You always had a runny nose. So we started referring to ourselves as snotty-nosed res kids, like as our friends as snotty-nosed res kids. And the story behind the actual name for ourselves came from a time when we were about probably like 17 years old. We were sitting at a restaurant eating food. It's called Seamasters right inside our village. And this little girl came up and she like popped up above the window and like looked us dead in the eyes and then picked up a dead crow and like opened its wings wide open and then just started laughing. And we're like, wow, that's a snotty-nosed res kid if I've ever seen one.
So she inspired your whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking back at it, it just, when we were thinking about our name and what to call ourselves and what to brand ourselves as, that was it. That was just it. That was perfect for who we are.
Well, it certainly gets your attention.
Yeah, definitely. There's like 2 reactions that I've noticed over the year and some. There's like the side that gets uncomfortable when we say it, and then there's the other half that just laughs with us. Like, I get it. So.
I love it. Although I always want to kind of blow my nose, just sort of do a little quick check there.
So it keeps you thinking.
It does. Keeps you on your toes. So now, as I said, you started out making music for Indigenous peoples. But when you're nominated for something like the Polaris Prize, there's a whole new audience that opens up for you. What's it been like for you?
It's been wild, because like when we first started doing this, we started doing it for ourselves first and foremost, and for the people that come from our reservations and come from our experiences. But over the last few years here, it's kind of transformed into more of that with the release of The Average Savage, because The Average Savage was us addressing stereotypes that were addressed to our people through media like Disney and cartoons, and trying to drill that into our heads as kids. So when The Average Savage got shortlisted, it showed that people actually cared about our message and what we were talking about. It showed us that non-Indigenous people took it in like we meant for it to be,
Mm-hmm. That was Darren Young, D. Metz, and Quentin Young, Tribes Nice, a.k.a. the Snotty-Nosed Res Kids. I caught up with them when they were wrapping up work on their new album. That album, Trapline, will be out in May. Their last album, The Average Savage, was shortlisted for a Polaris Prize and also earned them a Juno nomination. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1 and Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. Taking a musical tour of the Juno nominees for Indigenous Music Album of the Year on the show today. Northern Cree has repped Treaty 6 in Alberta since 1982. And after 37 years, more than 24 albums, 8 Grammy and 3 Juno nominations later, many of them still live back home on the res. So our own Kyle Musica headed to Musquecheese to find out more about this drum group.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Kyle from CBC Unreserved. I'm here in Musquecheese, and I'm driving around. Well, I'm not exactly driving. I'm in the passenger seat. Driving is Steve Wood. Now, he's a member of Northern Cree, one of the bands that is up for Indigenous Artist of the Year this year. Now, Steve Wood has been with the band for all 37 years of its existence. And right now, he's here to tell me a little bit about his community. So, tell me where we are currently right now.
We're in the Samson Cree Nation. We'll just go around here. Right off to the left here is the Samson High School, and of course the RCMP Police Detachment right up here, and just living quarters.
So, how many people live here?
In this, there's about, in Musquecheese here, there's probably somewhere about 17,000 to 20,000 Crees who live here. These are 4 bands that belong to the Cree Nation, which is the tribe, right? The Cree tribe. And I'm Cree, but I come from a different reserve. I'm from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation, which is about 3 hours northeast of here, up around St. Paul. I've lived in Musquecheese for 37 years. This is where my beautiful wife is from, and I've raised my 2 children here.
That's amazing. So, what brought you here?
Beauty. My wife, like I said, I met my wife, and I ended up coming out here to be with her for a bit. And at the time I was going to university, getting my second degree in education. As you know, like I'm an administrator now.
So tell me what this place means to you.
Well, it means a lot because I think I know more people here than I do in the community that I originate from.
Northern Cree is obviously very, very widespread. There's lots of people from different communities. Can you tell me a little bit about why that is?
Well, because Northern Cree originates from the Treaty 6 area, which we are on, and which encompasses most of central Alberta and central Saskatchewan, because we have members from, like I said, myself from Saddle Lake, a few people from Saddle Lake, from Samson, from the Louis Bull Cree Nation, which is one of the 4 reserves here, also from Frog Lake Cree Nation, Poundmaker Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. Yeah, we represent a wide variety of communities in the Treaty 6 area.
So this is number 8 for you guys, Juno nominations?
That's actually we've had 8 Grammy nominations. This is like our 3rd Juno nomination. We did garner a Juno last year in the classical music category for work that we did with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet with their symphony orchestra and a nice lady named Tanya Tagag. We ended up being honored at the Junos.
Yeah, Tanya Tagak, certified nice lady. You know, the Grammy, have you guys won one? I couldn't find that if you had won a Grammy yet.
You know, we haven't actually received one of those Grammy statues, but I think we've won already because, like, up until 2017, our music had never been performed on that big of a stage for the whole world to hear. And back in 2017, we opened the Grammy Awards, which actually people were wondering, like, well, in the evening. Well, actually, the Grammy Awards start in the afternoon because there's so many categories. And we were the opening act for the Grammys back in 2017. And I think we won by just being on that stage and getting to share our music, because I recall that day, and when I retired that night, put my phone aside, and then when I woke up in the morning, I checked it. There was a bunch of messages. And I checked our page, and we had like 4 million hits on our page, which was astounding. And, you know, just getting our music out there and letting the world know that we're very much still here.
So it sounds like we just need to get you a statue.
That would be nice. Do you know what we do with that if we ever got it? You know where we take it first? We take it to all the schools, again, to show our young people that anything's possible. That we're just like them. We live in the community just like them. And we still go to our traditional ceremonies, our traditional gatherings, because that's who we really are. And if we ever garnered one of those are the first places we take it. So I brought you here, Kyle, because this is the original place that we would perform our music. This is the Bear Park, where we have like our summer gatherings. The powwow, so to speak. 2 powwows will be held here for sure this summer. One is the Samson Cree Nation powwow and the Ermineskin Cree Nation powwow. During those gatherings, about 10,000 people will be on this grounds for 3 days and 3 nights. People will fill this whole area with trailers, tents, etc. And it's just a huge gathering of people. And everybody's invited to these gatherings. You don't have to ask, and you don't have to necessarily be Cree or First Nations for that matter. We invite you all to our gatherings. You can come out and enjoy some of our culture because we want to share it with you.
And do you guys perform every year here?
Actually, because we have bookings like all over North America and sometimes overseas. The last time we performed here was 2015, I think.
What do you think or maybe what are you hearing from people in terms of what Northern Cree means to Ermineskin and Samson and, all of Musqueam and by greater extension Treaty 6? What do you guys have a sense of in terms of what you guys mean to the people here?
Well, I think we're ambassadors, and not just for the 4 nations here, but all of, like you're correct, all of the Treaty 6 area, and even beyond that to all of the First Nations people across Turtle Island. I think we're ambassadors, and I think we inspire the young people, like I said, to be who they are and not to look down upon themselves, that we have a lot to offer. And like I said, this music has been here since time immemorial, but it's just starting to get out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing to and I'll just, as an aside from me, just seeing the evolution of what Indigenous music has become, and that there's room for everybody at the table. There's room for people who are still doing traditional things, and there's room for people who are doing modern things. It's really awesome to see that there's seems to be more space now.
I think it's yes, it is. It's a very good place to be. I think it's a vehicle. Music, any type of music, is a vehicle that brings all kinds of people from different ethnicities, different nationalities together, and they can all speak the same language. Music.
Yeah, it's universal, hey?
There you go, it's universal. Exactly.
Steve, thank you for the time and for the drive.
Hi, Mr. Tamyogi Sigansen. It means thank you very much. You have a great day.
That was Kyle Musica with Steve Wood of Northern Cree. That group is nominated for a Juno for Indigenous Music Album of the Year. You're listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. Today we're building our Juno Award playlist and hearing from all the artists nominated for Indigenous Music Album of the Year. Leonard Sumner has had his eye on a Juno for years. He's released 2 albums, and this year his latest, Standing in the Light, got him his first Juno nom. Leonard is originally from the Little Saskatchewan First Nation in Manitoba, and he's joined me in our studio in Winnipeg. Leonard, welcome.
Buju, Tanzi, Wachi.
Anine. First of all, congratulations, Standing in the Light. That's the name of your album that was nominated for the Indigenous Music Album of the Year. Mm-hmm. Where does that title come from?
Well, it's inspired by a book that I read by Severt Youngbear, who was a Lakota powwow singer, and he wrote a book called Standing in the Light. In there, he explains a concept about how he sees Standing in the Light as one of the Indigenous ideologies that could be used in a broad scope, but he speaks about it in the powwow. So in the powwow arbor, he says the people that stand at the center stand in the light, and those are the people that know where the songs come from, what they mean, the purpose, when you should sing a certain song. Then you go from the center to the arbor. It's like a concentric circle, and then the people in the arbor will know what the song means or how to sing it, but they won't quite know the origin of it or they might not be able to explain it to you, so they know a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole like standing in the light for myself, I literally stand on stage in a light often to sing these songs. So yeah, it just felt right. And Hitchikatig Ninibo is how you say it in Ojibwe. It's like where the light is, I am standing there.
I want to ask you about a song in particular called The Ceremony. Tell me about where this song came from.
There's 3 different verses, and it's all about ceremony, and it is about displacement and like coming back to, the center, so to speak. When I first had the idea I was going to write the song, I was with Ryan McMahon in Saskatoon. And he went for a gig, and there was some time where we were like, well, man, what are we going to do while we wait for you to go do your show? Like, it's like, I don't know, what is there in Saskatoon? It's like, let's go. I was like, well, maybe let's go to a pawn shop and like go looking, like maybe there'll be like some cool there. So
that's what one does.
Yeah, I guess so. That's so we went to the pawn shop, and we walked in, and there was like a row of like regalia, like jingle dresses, but in one particular, it was the jingle dress that was like staring at you as you walked into the room, and it was like, holy smokes, like that probably shouldn't be in a pawn shop. We didn't know what to think. We kind of like were just like, oh wow, and taken aback. And so as we were kind of like driving out of the city, we were both kind of just like silently like like pontificating on what we had just seen.
Why was it so unsettling for you to see a jingle dress in a pawn shop?
Because it's not serving its intent. It is supposed to be a dress for healing, and there's what some consider a sacred story connected to that dress, and to see it there was just disheartening. And so I sat with those thoughts, and I was like, man, I wonder like if I could somehow include that in a song someday. That's one aspect of the story, and it's the second verse of the song, The Ceremony, on my album. That's one song on the album, so like every line, every line, every piece of this is a part of the true reflection of my life.
So what does it mean for you to be nominated for a Juno this year for this album?
It does feel great to be nominated in this category, especially with the caliber of artists in this year's Juno category for Indigenous Album of the Year. The nomination itself feels like the victory for me as an independent artist. And it'd be nice to bring home some hardware. We'll see what happens.
Well, you can take it to a pawn shop then.
I'll pawn it. Yeah. Elvis pawn. Get ready.
Get ready, Elvis pawn. I'm coming at you. Thank you, Leonard, for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now let's go to Elvis Pawn Shop and see what we can find.
Let's do it.
That was musician Leonard Sumner. His latest album, Standing in the Light, is nominated for the Indigenous Music Album of the Year. Continuing on with our Juno-nominated playlist on the show today, Enoch singer-songwriter Elissa P. is also up for an Indigenous Music Album of the Year. Her nomination for her album, The Ballad of the Runaway Girl, is her second. She won a Juno in 2005 for Aboriginal Album of the Year as part of the duo Taima. Here's Elissa P. explaining what inspired her newest album.
I thought this album was going to be, done earlier. And then I had my baby boy, my second child, and it evoked something very strong, very deep. I don't like to call it depression, but it took me maybe 2 years to try to write songs, and then it would get just too heavy. I just couldn't be there anymore. It was just too much because I had my family to take care of, also my kids, and so I started listening to this music, my uncle's band, like Sugluk Band, 60s, 70s, music, Willie Thrasher, Willie Mitchell, Willie Dunn, of course. Mm-hmm. I just got stuck there, and I guess instead of going to psychologist, I just kind of got obsessed with this sound, these people, and they brought me back to life, I guess, and back to the surface so I could write songs again. So that's pretty much how this album was done. So going back to the roots, learning about how fragile a human being can be, and at the same time feeling more strength and power than ever.
That's quite the journey.
Yes.
What was it about the willies, as we like to call them, that pulled you out of that dark place and enabled you to do music again?
Willie Thrasher was this legendary person who I thought was a white man because he sang in English, but he's from Inuvialuit, out western northern Canada. Inuk boy who was, like many, brought to residential schools, being removed from the territory, could no longer speak Inuktitut. So I realized later on who he was, and so I got obsessed with that album, Spirit Child, 1981 album. It's just very powerful. The way they were also, what they sang about, like Willie Mitchell has a Willie song of Call of the Moose. Willie Dunn has a song called I Pity the Country, which is just like
amazing.
I couldn't even try to sing it, even if I wanted to, just because it's so perfect and amazing and so accurate to 2017 then, so...
Now, the first single that you're releasing from the album is called Wolves Don't Live by the Rules, and written by Willie Thrasher. Why did you choose to do that song, first of all, and then put it out in the world first?
This song, I guess, was one of the first songs that we recorded when we wanted to do a demo out in the 3 days, January, winter, near Montreal, but out in the country in front of a lake, and it was very magical. And I thought maybe I should just write a cover album, Inuit album that I've always wanted to do for me, just for my own pleasure. And then I had 2-3 original songs, and then we recorded that song also by Willie Thrasher, Wolves Don't Live by the Rules, and I think then it became clear that my songs that I'm writing and these cover songs combine and they kind of go together.
So the release of the single is also accompanied by a beautiful music video of archival footage from Inuit communities. Listeners can see that at our website, cbc.ca/unreserved. Elissa P., what were you hoping to convey with the video?
I went to Avatar Cultural Institute, and there are some amazing people who give old footage for Inuit to use. So I was able to find these images, and when I found these images, I just cried. It's so... Because not long ago, Inuit stopped living in the igloo. In the 50s, we were still in the igloos. My mother was born in the igloo. So... trying to find that the first time when they stepped out from the igloo and they started being, also living in communities, and they had to settle. The government told them, you don't move anymore, guys. You semi-nomadic people. So we can feel it. We can see that. Yet there's beauty and excitement, but yet you can still see they're Inuit and they're meant to be out in the land, but they're dressed up like any normal white southern person. So for me, those late 60s images and 70s really come and get me. And a lot of Inuit watch that and they get very emotional because that was the transition, right? So I thought I want to show that. And I know everybody knows we lived in igloos. Everybody know we had dog sleds. So it's cool, but I don't want to show the typical things that because people also have it stuck in their head. The only thing they think is snow, igloo, and dog sled. And we are beyond that. So I thought it'd be nice to show emotion differently, and also to show that we're survival people, but yet we're still smiling, and that. So that was my purpose of this
Such
video.
joy on the faces.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today, Elissa P.
Thank you so much. Nakomik.
That's it for the show this week. If you want to find out more about any of these Juno-nominated acts, head to our website, cbc.ca/unreserved. And make sure you tune in next week. Author, artist, and musician Tom Wilson will be my guest to talk about what happened when a long-held family secret came out.
6 years ago, I was going out on a speaking tour, and they'd given me a handler, somebody to basically get me to the airport, get me to my hotel, get me to the gig. And she was out front in a limousine out in front of my house, and I took my bags. I walked out. I got into the back of the limousine. She goes, "Oh, I'm so excited. I'm a big fan of yours. We're going to Regina and Winnipeg." And I said, "That all sounds great." And she goes, "You don't know this, but your family and my family, we're friends." She goes, "Yes, in fact, my grandmother and Bunny were so close that she was there the day you were adopted." And I said, "What?" I'd never heard the words come from a stranger or anybody else.
Tom Wilson will be with me on the show next week to talk about how discovering his Mohawk heritage has changed his entire world. We'll be back in this radio space next week for more community, culture, and conversation. This episode was produced by Stephanie Cram, Kyle Musica, Zoe Tennant, and Anna Lazowski. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at unreserved@cbc.ca or find us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild, coming at you from Winnipeg in Treaty 1 territory. Thank you for listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. I go say.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.